Okay, what are you saying, people, and welcome back to my channel. Now today I've got another weekly forex analysis for you guys. So on the screen are the pairs that we're looking at today. But before we get into that, make sure you subscribe to the channel and also leave a like on the video if you're feeling generous. If you haven't already, make sure you follow me on my Instagram. I'll leave the handle there, and make sure you check out my Telegram channel as well for weekly forex updates. I'll leave that link in the description below. But like I said, we've got another weekly forex analysis, so let me stop talking and let's get into the video. First up, we've got Euro USD. Okay, so we're going to start with Euro USD. So for this pair, as you can see, I had a really nice push to the upside this week. Again, we had this really nice area of support in the market. As you can see, this support eventually did give us a really big move to the upside. We broke through it, came back in, retested it, and last week we did say that potentially could see a nice push to the upside for Euro USD this week. And as you can see, that's exactly what happened. We were targeting this area here, as you can see, previous support there once, twice, a third time, and it didn't get retested. So we were looking to see if we can get a nice retest of that area. And as you can see, price actually broke above it, and it's actually using it as support currently. So for Euro USD for next week, I do see a move to the downside. However, this area of the market will be acting as support, so we might get another push to the upside back into this area here of the market, which is our previous kind of like major swing high in the market. As you can see, this is kind of the last push up before having this big dump to the downside. So I think we might see one more push up, taking out these highs here, pushing into this area, and from there, if we do hold it as resistance, break back below this area, I do see a nice move back into this level here for Euro USD next week, as long as we stay below this area, because we start breaking that area there, the structure of the market changes, and we could actually see the market push very strongly to the upside. And if we take a look at the weekly time frame really quickly, you can actually see that we're actually at a very strong area of resistance in the market. So if I go to the weekly, you can see this is prior weekly resistance, was acting as support for us for a little bit, broke underneath, and now we're testing that as resistance again. So as you can see, this level held the market as consolidation for quite a while before having a strong close above, and then we saw that breakout. So as long as we stay underneath this level from a weekly perspective, I do think we'll probably see a push to the downside, because again, it did help hold all that consolidation, and it is a strong level with some weight behind it. So we've got confidence there for a move to the downside for USD. Obviously, if we get above it, expect a breakout to the upside, but for now we're still holding underneath it. So for next week, I'm expecting to see a push to the downside for USD. Again, one more push to the upside to go and test this area, and then a push back down to around 1.7800, 1.1780 or 1.17600. So push to the upside first, and then a nice push to the downside for USD for next week. Next, we're going to take a look at USD JPY. Okay, so up next we've got USD JPY, and as you can see for this pair, we had a really nice push to the upside recently, and then the market dumped to the downside. So the market last week, I was saying we potentially could be getting a retest of this area here in the market, really nice area of previous resistance. As you can see, a really nice push to the downside. So I was saying potentially could roll over to this area, use that as support to go and hit our next target, which is our weekly previous swing high, which is this area here in the market. As you can see, this is our major swing high before having that big push to the downside. So since we did break through that weekly trend line all the way back from 2016, I did say price has a good chance of tapping back into that previous swing high, because normally when you do see a break of a downtrend in that trend line, you normally see a push to that previous swing high in the market, which is this area here. So that is where my bias was to for USD JPY. However, we did take a nice dive to the downside this week, and price did get back below this key area. So this potentially could just be a false breakout. As you can see, a really nice area of resistance, big push to the downside, big push above, again tricking people, faking people out, and then get back below and then holding as resistance. So if the market does continue to hold this as resistance, I do see potentially a nice move to the downside back into these lows here, back into our previous support in the market before we had this big push to the upside, because at this point we'll probably have a false breakout, and again you can see it does have some good weight behind it, so we could be seeing a nice push to the downside, and that this downtrend here on the 4 hourly, the hourly will probably continue and see price push into this area here, which is around 108,400. So biases to the downside as long as we keep as long as we maintain that area as resistance. However, get back above that area with a daily closure, so not Friday, with a daily candle, then we could see that continuation to the upside back into that area that I was targeting on the weekly time frame, which is around 11,500. So if I just highlight that area on the weekly, as you can see, around 111,500. So that could be the area to target if we were to get back above that level there on the daily. But again, right now we're back below, holding as resistance, and if we maintain this, I do see another push to the downside for USD back into around 108,500. So biases to the downside for USD next week. However, get back above that level, then I'll be switching my bias to bullish and expecting a push to around 11500. And next we've got USD CAD. Okay, so for USD CAD this week, again, not too much happened on the daily chart. 4 hourly, we did get some nice movements up and down. Again, we still do have this key area here around 1.26200. Key level of support, resistance. So key level of support and resistance on the daily time frame. And last week we were trading around this area here, and I did say I was favoring another push to the upside for USD CAD since we were struggling to move lower. As you can see, we did see that push back into that level. However, we did fail to break through it. As you can see, we had some few wicks and the market took another dive to the downside. And if we did break through it, I was favoring a move back into this area here. However, as you can see, we did not, and now we're starting to look quite bearish after that second rejection from that level. You can see the daily candle closing very bearish, giving us a nice shooting star there. So I still do think for USD CAD, we'll probably see another push to the downside. Not sure if we'll be all the way back to these lows here, but I feel like it could be potentially back into this area here in the market. So if I drop to the 4H, this was our previous support before we had this dive push to the downside, essentially a false breakout since we did come up very strongly. So I do feel like USD CAD is going to maintain that bearish momentum we're seeing in the markets towards the end of last week, continue that into next week, see a move back into around 1.24800, maybe even 1.24600, but I expect to see a push to the downside and then maybe a push back up again, and just continue potentially a little bit of a range for USD CAD between 1.26200 and 1.24800. So for next week, I'm expecting to see that continuation to the downside again. You can see the market is already very bearish here, coming back into this area of support here in the market, which I do expect to see get broken and see a move to the downside back into this area. If you do break through this area here, of course, then I do expect price to come back to the lows and potentially even create a new low at that point. But as long as we stay above this area, I think we could see another push back into this area here and then potentially a breakout eventually. But for USD CAD, biases to the downside, and then we're just going to watch how price action reacts with this level. If we see rejection, I do think another push back up to 1.26200, get below it and then hold. Then we're looking for shorts and then continue that sell bias all the way back down to these lows. Up next is Euro GBP. Okay, so up next we've got Euro GBP. So for this pair, we took a very big push to the upside. We did start the week quite bearish. I did say last week we do expect to see further continuation to the downside to around about 0.84700. As you can see, we did tap into that level around here before we got that big reaction to the upside. And again, it was a really nice area of daily support and resistance. So we just take this level across. You can see it acting here previously as a really nice area of support and resistance. So resistance there a couple of times, support there, resistance there. So you can see price was reacting really well in the past. So that's where I was aiming for Euro GBP to head into. And you can see we tapped into that level and got a really nice bullish reaction to the upside. And as you can see, that day there took out about 7 days worth of trading, and then a big push to the upside, closing back above this area of daily support. So you can see support, held that consolidation, was resistance before we broke to the downside. So broke above all of that area and then continued to the upside. So Euro GBP is looking very, very bullish here. However, we are coming to back into a very strong area of prior weekly support and our-term resistance. So you can see here this area of support gave this big move to the upside where the market was moving sideways for quite some time before breaking to the downside. So we're back at that same area again in the market. I do expect to see some type of bearish reaction. However, this could potentially just be one big false breakout, because you can see in the weekly chart, we took this dive to the downside, price action got really, really choppy. So if we were to see a second week pushing to the upside, closing back above here, a nice bullish candle, this would just be one big false breakout, and from then on we can probably expect to see the market continue back into around this area here of price support, now term resistance. So that could be what could be happening for Euro GBP on the weekly time frame. However, we're going to monitor price action in that area, because this well be could a very strong retest of that price support term resistance. And as you can see there on the daily, we already had some depletion in momentum, big bullish candles coming to that level. And as you can see on Friday, we had that doji which actually closed slightly bearish. So obviously the momentum is dying out, because we are coming back into that really strong area of resistance. You can see last time we were here, we did see a really nice wick up above it, come back down, close bearish, giving us that shooting star, and we did see a nice dive to the downside. So for Euro GBP, as long as we hold this as resistance, I do see a nice push back into this level here. For Euro GBP, retest that as support. As you can see, when we broke back above that area, we didn't get any retest of any kind, we just continued to the upside. So I think if we do hold this area as resistance, we'll probably see another push to the downside to hold that area there in the market. However, get above this area, it probably was just one big false breakout, and then we can probably expect to see a bullish trend now for Euro GBP to the upside, and prices continue a lot higher, and we can probably target 0.89, again long-term target for Euro GBP. So again, this is a key level to monitor price action, see what prices do on the 4-hourly, on the daily chart. Is it breaking above, is it holding? And that can determine your bias for next week. But right now the market is holding, so my bias is to the downside back into here. However, that can change with just one big candle closing back above, and then we see some rejection as price holds that as support, and then we can change our bias to the upside and see a nice continuation and the start of a bullish trend for Euro GBP. So for next week, just monitor price action here, and it will determine the bias for the rest of the week. Okay, so up next we've got AUD USD. Okay, so up next we've got AUD USD. So for this pair this week, not too much happened. As you can see, overall kind of just moving sideways. Slight uptrend in the market, as you can see here with this trend line, but overall we are moving sideways. Price is still holding this key area in the market, 0.76500 as resistance. So as you can see, support, 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 false break underneath, support, now acting as resistance. So since we are holding this as resistance, I do think we'll probably see a push to the downside as long as we keep up to around 0.75. Again, if we break above, then that will invalidate that idea, and if we do that, then I do see a push back into 0.78 and just fill this range here in the market. So as you can see, when we're holding this level as support, we've got a range between 0.78, this resistance here, and 0.76500, this support here. So get back above that area, nice daily close. I do see us continuing to the upside and just filling in that range. However, since we're having such a hard time getting back above 0.76500, I do see us taking another dive to the downside of this impulsive move. This could just be the retrace, and I expect the continuation to the downside as well. So I am expecting to see a push to the downside to around 0.75, which does line up with this area of support in the market. As you can see, we did take a really nice push to the upside from this area, which gave us that continuation. So I do think we'll tap back into that. And as you can see, we just missed that when we had this push to the downside here. Sharp move back up, retesting 0.76500. So if we do take out this support here in the market, which is kind of keeping us kind of moving sideways for AUD, I do see a nice dive to the downside back into 0.75. So get a nice break, retest. I do see a nice push to the downside for AUD USD next week, which is the move I'm favoring. But again, we need to stay on our toes, reactive, not predictive. If we do get back above this area, a nice daily close, and hold this as support, showing rejection, then could we look to take advantage of the move in the opposite direction back up to 0.78. So two possibilities there for AUD USD, but I'm favoring the move to the downside for this pair. So a break of this support and a continuation back down to 0.75. Now let's take a look at NZD CAD. Okay, so up next we've got NZD CAD. So NZD CAD this week, again, we had a slight push to the upside. Price looked like it was trying to break to the upside here. Last week I did say if we manage to break above this level and hold, we'll probably see a nice continuation to the upside and price take off to this area here in the market. price support, now term resistance, since we did not get a retest. As you can see, strong close below and we just took off to the downside. So I was favoring a retest of that level if we did break above. Now, as you can see, we did break above, however, we failed to sustain ourselves above there. We had a retest, a push back up, and a push back down towards the end of the week, breaking back below. So my bias for NZD CAD is very much to the downside here. As you can see, when we tried to break above, the price could not sustain itself. Now she ended up breaking back below towards the end of the week. So for an opportunity, it'd be nice to see a bit of retrace NZD CAD back into that level, hold it as resistance, show us some rejection, and could look to capitalize on another move to the downside. But as you can see, for NZD CAD for the past few weeks now, we've been in a very strong downtrend, and it looks like we just had another impulsive move. This price action here just looks to be retraced for another continuation and another impulsive move to the downside. So that is what I'm favoring for NZD CAD. I think we'll probably come back into these lows here, maybe see a slight new low in the market. We are slightly overextended overall to the downside. So if we do take out these lows, I'm not sure how, if it will be an actual breakout or just short-lived. So a quick break below, a quick break back above, so a bit of a false breakout. But I do feel like we could potentially see some new lows for NZD CAD because we are in that downtrend, and in that downtrend you do expect new lows, new highs, new lows, new highs. So this potentially here could be our new high, and I do expect to see a nice continuation to the downside for next week for NZD CAD, back into these lows here, and if you manage to break through them, could tap a little bit further to the downside. So that is what I'm favoring. If we do get back above, again, I'm not too sure if we will get this false, we'll get that breakout to the upside, just because when we did break above, we had such a hard time of continuing that move. So I think for the new a new level that we need to break for us to have a real continuation to the upside, it's probably these recent highs here where we had that double top. So price did push the upside, test it once, test it again, fell to the downside. So if we take out that resistance there, then we can probably expect some more upwards movement for NZD CAD. However, as long as we stay below that area, I do see further continuation. So nice opportunity could be pull back into this area for a nice test of that resistance, then a continuation, or a test of that area just above here into there, and then a continuation to the downside, giving us a triple top. But overall bias is very much to the downside for NZD CAD, expecting a little bit of retrace, give us a nice opportunity to get into some shorts, then a move back into these lows here and potentially even further. Next up, we've got GBP NZD. Okay, so for GBP this week, as you can see, we had a really nice dump to the downside, and last week I was favoring a move to the downside. I did say last week we'll probably break out this area consolidation to the downside, since the market was having such a hard time breaking through this previous resistance here in the market. So if I do highlight this area, take that across, you can see we wicked into that level a few times, once, twice, then a third time just about before dumping to the downside. So price was having a hard time breaking that resistance. So I was favoring a nice push to the downside, and since we were a little bit overextended as well after that big bullish candle that we had a couple of weeks ago. So we had a nice move to the downside. If you look at the 4H, again, we're still looking quite bearish there. I do see further continuation to the downside, tapping around into this area of support around 1.93. As you can see, this support here, nice pullback into this area and then a big push to the upside. So I do see us tapping back into that area. However, we do have some previous resistance turned support that the market is currently respecting. So you can see resistance, resistance, resistance now will be acting as support. So I do think we'll see a little bit bigger of a reaction to the upside in respect to that level, and then eventually break through it, tapping back down to 1.93. So I do see us having a little bit more of a pullback in this bearish trend that we're having in the 4H, giving us another lower high, and then we do start to find resistance, which could be around here. As you can see, that was like our last push to the downside. If I jump to the hourly, and you can see a nice push to the downside, pull back, and then we had this big collapse to the downside. So could tap back into this area here, could be looking for some nice shorts, and then capitalizing on another leg to the downside, as long as we do maintain respect for that level. And also, if I just take this across here, you can see it was acting as previous support here for us there in the market for the range on the daily. So bias is overall still to the downside for GBP. Expecting to see a bit of a pullback in a reaction to that previous resistance turn support. Get above that area, we might see a continuation to the upside. However, I don't think we'll get back above that area. See a little bit of a pullback, then a continuation to the downside. Get above that area, however, then yeah, I think we could be seeing price come back to these highs. But I'm more leaning towards price holding this area than a continuation all the way down to 1.93. Next, we're going to move on to CAD JPY. Okay, so for CAD JPY this week, as you can see, we had a really nice push to the downside for this pair. Last week I was favoring push to the downside. We had all this consolidation last week, and I was favoring price to break to the downside since we were making some lower highs in this area, and we did take a nice dive to the downside. And we also were tapping into a really key level of weekly resistance here in the market. So I just take this across. You can see really nice area of resistance there in the market, took a really nice dive all the way down to these lows here. So it has a lot of weight behind it. I was expecting to see a bit more of a bearish reaction, and also we failed to have a retest of this level of resistance when we did break above. As you can see, a strong break above and price continued to the upside. So I do think we'll still eventually get a retest of this area as support. However, right now we're kind of just on the weekly anyway, just testing that area of weekly resistance. So we have seen some really nice areas of rejection. Price did have this big push to the upside towards the end of the last week. So as you can see, we are looking at a little bit bullish there. So it could be a situation where we have another push back into this level and then see another bearish reaction, because as you can see, we are still making higher highs, higher lows. So there's our swing high, new higher low, new higher high, potentially new higher low. So I do feel like for CAD JPY, we'll probably see another continuation of this bullish formation that we're seeing on the 4 hourly back into this area of resistance, maybe slightly just taking out those highs and then seeing another push to the downside, because now we're getting a bit of a trend line here in the market. So again, test one, second test, third test, so another push back into this area, and then potentially go and get our fourth test. And then if we do get finally a break of that trend line, we can probably start to see a bit of a bearish trend for CAD JPY and price continue all the way back down to that area there on the weekly. So if I quickly jump back to the weekly, prior resistance now turns support. So if you do break that trend line, eventually you might get back down to there. Again, a little bit more of a bolder call, but I do still feel like we'll probably get a retest of that area back as support on the weekly time frame. So for next week, I do see a continuation to the upside. As you can see, we are looking quite bullish there towards the end of the week. So I do see the market pushing back into that weekly area, then another push back into that trend line, and just maintaining that push pull structure that we're seeing there on CAD JPY. And again, a break of that trend line and hold, so a retest, show us that we're failing to get back above. I do think we'll see a nice dump to the downside back down to that area. Again, that'll probably take a few weeks to play out, but that's more long term. So for CAD JPY next week, continuation to the upside back into that weak resistance, and then another push back down. Up next is GBP USD. Okay, so for GBP USD this week, as you can see, I had a nice push to the upside first to start the week off. If I go to the 4 hour, you see it a little bit clearer. So a nice push to the upside, start the week off, and a quick dump to the downside. So price right now for GBP USD is looking quite bearish. Last week I did say if we can get above this area and hold, I do see further continuation back up to 1.4, which is this resistance here. However, as you can see, we did fail to hold that level. We got above it, then straight back below, so a bit of a false move there. And then we had a break of that trend line there in the market. So I did say a break of this 4 hourly trend line will probably take us to the downside, back down to these lows here. And I do see us pushing back into 1.36, which does line up with this area here of support. As you can see, nice big push to the upside, starting this big bullish rally to the upside, and I do think we'll probably see price tap back into that area. So my bias is very much to the downside for GBP USD. We broke through that trend line, and as you can see, we're creating that bearish structure to the downside. So it would be nice to see a little bit of a pullback for this pair, give us a nice opportunity and a push back into this level. So again, we have this really nice area of resistance there, so maybe push back into it, hold it as resistance, then could see a nice continuation to the downside back to 1.36. So that is what I'm favoring for GBP/USD. We had that strong break, that trend line back below that key level on the daily. So I expect to see a little bit of a pullback and a continuation to the downside back to 1.36. Of course, you might see a little bit of struggle at this area. As you can see, we already tapped into it because that was our prior swing low of the market. So we'll take a little bit of momentum to go and break through it. So that's why I'm expecting to see a little bit of a pullback into this area. Look for some opportunities, some shorting opportunities, some rejection, candlestick patterns, and then we could look to take advantage of a nice move to the downside, breaking below this level, giving us a new low in the market. Since, as you can see, if I zoom out, we are making lower lows, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs. So that potentially could be our lower high, and I'm expecting to see a continuation back down to 1.36 to test that area of support. And next we're going to see what's happening with GBP CAD. Okay, so for GBP CAD this week had a really nice dump to the downside. So we had this key area of resistance here in the market and this key area of support here as well. So we had a bit of a range here. I did say we could either see a breakout this week or another swing, another continuation back to the downside. So again, key area of support and resistance around 1.74500 and 1.72. So last week we're trading around this area here, and as I was saying, we could potentially either see a nice breakout, then a continuation to the upside, tapping back into our previous area of resistance up here, or just another swing to the downside, just continuing that overall consolidation we have between those two key levels there in the market. As you can see, we failed to break to the upside. We actually broke through this trend line here in the market. We did have a really nice area of retest with confluence of that resistance, and then we took a nice dive to the downside. So price is looking quite bearish here. It looks like we actually are poking just below that area of support in the market, so potentially having a breakout. Again, it's just one candle. We could see the next candle Monday just close right back above, so I'm not going to take that too much as gospel, but if we do have a breakout, we could actually see the market fall to the downside a lot further actually, because as you can see, when we do break through this support, we do have a quite nice clean area to the downside, which the market does have key level of support around here. So could actually see GB CAD fall to the downside quite nicely and tap back into this area here, which is all the way down to around 1.68. Again, a little bit more of a bolder call, but if we do fail to get back above this level here and show a lot of rejection, I do see us eventually giving a move all the way back down to these lows here, because if I go to the weekly time frame, you can see we're at a very key level of resistance here in the market, and we had a really nice reaction at that level. So we do have that extra time frame giving us that extra kick in the downside direction, because we're getting rejected from that level there. And as you can see, we're just seeing another continuation to the downside. So I do feel like GB CAD could be on its way further to the downside. However, if this was just a false breakout and we see Monday or Tuesday's candle closing right back above, and then from then on probably just see another swing back to the upside and just fill it in the range there of the market. Just another push up, retest, shows that they're holding, and then we'll see another push back to the upside. So next week for GBP CAD, since we have had a strong close below, could see a continuation to the downside, but just do be aware that if you were to close back above, can treat that as a false breakout and then see another swing back to the upside, just filling that range between 1.72 and 1.74500. Okay, up next we've got GBP JPY. Okay, so next up we've got GBP JPY. So for this pair, my bias was to the upside last week. As long as we stay above this previous area of resistance here in the daily time frame, as long as we hold that as support, I do see further continuation to the upside for GBP JPY. However, if we did get back below, I did say look for those retests, then could see a nice continuation to the downside, because at that point it probably is just a false breakout. So as you can see here, it does look like a little bit of a false breakout there for GBP JPY. So as you can see in the 4-hourly time frame, we did see that collapse to the downside, quick retest, then a continuation to the downside. So right now GBP JPY is still looking very bearish. I do think potentially could see the price come all the way back down to this area around 149, potentially even 148,500, give us a new low below that area. If we do, potentially could see price go a lot further, but right now we are looking quite bearish. We do have this key level here in the market, as you can see, support there, resistance, support, and we're actually now holding that as resistance. So as long as we maintain respect to that level there in the market and we show rejection, I do see price pushing back down to this area here in the market, potentially getting below it and seeing a deeper move, because again, after the false breakout, the bigger move generally comes in the market. So potentially could actually see a break of that support and price go a lot further. But again, since the market is still so bullish here on the higher time frames like the weekly and the monthly, I'm not going to give that call out just yet. So I feel like for JPY, as long as we stay below that level there, I do see a nice continuation to the downside. So again, could be look for your shorts around here. However, get back above this level and hold it as support, I do see another continuation back into that resistance and then potentially even break above. But right now, bias is firmly to the downside, since we're holding this kind of key level here on the 4-hourly as resistance. We've had that false breakout on the daily. I do see further continuation to the downside for GBP into next week, back down to this level, as long as we hold that as resistance and potentially even break back below, and then maybe tap back into around 148 for next week for GBP. And up next, we're going to take a look at gold. Okay, so now we're going to move on to gold. So for gold this week, had a nice continuation to the upside. Price was looking quite bullish at one point. It did take out our previous highs here in the market. So you can see previous high there, did take it out just a little bit, failed to sustain itself, however, and did fall to the downside. Gold did break above our 1738 level, which is this key level of resistance in the market. As you can see, resistance, and eventually give us this big push to the downside. So I was saying if we do hold this area, I do see a nice continuation for gold to the upside back to around 1770. As you can see, really key level of support in the market, which we did not get a retest when we broke below, and as you can see, give us a big move to the upside. So I do feel like a retest of that level is still very much possible. And during the week, we were trading above this trend line here in the market. So just connecting those lows there. As you can see, test, and actual test as well just before the market closed on Friday. So if we do maintain that respect for that trend line and keep holding that level as support, I do see us climbing up to that level, testing that as resistance, and then maybe either rejecting or breaking back above that level and seeing a bigger move for gold there on the higher time frames. But for now, as long as we maintain respect for that trend line and that level as support, I do see a nice push back into that daily zone. However, get back below that trend line, hold it as resistance, and at the same time hold that level as resistance, I do see a push to the downside back to around 1710, which is this area here in the market. As you can see, held this really nice area of support and gave us that big push, tapping into that level there. So two possibilities there for gold, either push to the downside or push back up. And again, it just determines whether we get that price action showing rejection or showing that we're going to break through this level. So right now we're trading above. If we maintain that, hold it as support, I do see a push back into that level. However, get back below that level for next week for gold, show rejection around here as resistance, then we can be looking for those shorts back into around 1710 to test that area of support. And last but not least, we've got Bitcoin. And finally, we're going to take a look at Bitcoin. So for Bitcoin this week, not too much happened, mainly just consolidation. Price was moving sideways. We had this key level of support here in the market. So as you can see, support. Had a false break below, as you can see, false break below, got straight back above, and right now got Bitcoin is looking very, very bullish here. So I do see Bitcoin continuing to the upside. Again, the target was 65,000 up there in the market, and I do see price heading to that level. We've got our recent swing high around this level here in the market. So I think short term, that's where we're headed right now, since it does look like we're taking out this resistance here, which held us moving sideways. It looks like we've broken through that level right there. So I do see Bitcoin pushing to those highs there around 62,000. Break through those highs, then 65,000 is the next target for Bitcoin. But right now, overall, we are looking very, very bullish for this pair. If you were to see price break back in, then again, that would just be a false breakout, similar to what we had just below us here. See a retest, another swing back to the downside, and just continue that range for Bitcoin. But right now, price is still looking very, very bullish here on the 4-hourly. Again, higher time frame still looking very bullish as well. I do see us continuing to the upside. So it'd be nice to see a bit of a retest to the downside, hold this as support, push back into those highs, then I do see us having a really nice breakout all the way to 65,000 and potentially higher. So bias is still very much to the upside for Bitcoin. Might see potentially a retest, could have a nice opportunity if you're looking for buys, but overall I do see us taking out those highs at 62,000 and pushing up to 65,000. Okay, so that is the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed it and found it useful. Again, if you have any questions, agree or disagree with my analysis, just drop a comment down below and I'll make sure I get back to you guys. But thanks again for watching, and until the next one, I'll see you guys later.